press conference, President Trump announced that he is canceling the bill signing for the housing bill that you all were just talking about. The city's canceling it, but still the state that this has called this housing bill passed with bipartisan support. Minor importance instead of fails with comparison to the state. What is your reaction?
Yeah, my reaction is the truth of the matter. I spoke to the president for 20 minutes before I went in and gave that rousing speech to the House Republicans this morning. He and I've talked about this a lot. He has expressed the priority and the preference of the Save America Act. We share that. We passed it 3 times in the House. The latest version was passed a few months ago, and it has proof of citizenship to register to vote and the proof of showing a photo ID when you show up to vote. Basic issues that 90% of Americans agree. 70% of Democrats think you ought to have a photo ID to vote. And citizenship to vote in an American election is already in the law. But we have to enforce it because you got a few blue states that don't do that. The president believes in election integrity. He talks about it all the time, and we do as well. In act and deed, we have stood for that. We passed the Save America Act again. Here's this. Let me finish this. This is very important.
All right, people. Jack here. So what just happened, guys? Speaker Mike Johnson canceled the entire legislative week after hardline MAGA Republicans seized the House floor, refusing to let Congress function unless they pass Trump's election overhaul bill. It was a public admission that Johnson has lost control of his own chamber, marking one of the most embarrassing moments in modern House history. Now think about what this means for a speaker's authority and credibility. Think about what this says about Johnson's leadership and effectiveness. Think about what this signals to the entire world about the state of American government and institutional strength. The Speaker is supposed to control the House floor and direct its business. The Speaker is supposed to move legislation.
That is the top priority, because if you do not have safe elections in this grand experiment in self-governance that we have in a constitutional republic, you don't have anything. And we got to ensure it. We have to press for election integrity measures. That's why we've made it a top priority. It has been stuck in the Senate, and here's why. Because no Democrat in the House or Senate will vote for the Save America Act. Those 2 things I just told you, they vote against that every single time, and they will. Why? You ask that. That's a rhetorical question. You should go ask them the actual question. Why? Are you against proof of citizenship and a photo ID? Why is that? They can't give you a cogent answer. The reason is they do want to allow for cheating and fraud in the elections because it is the only way that the Marxists can win. They cannot win on their ideas. That's why this is so important. The president is to us. So how does that tie into housing? He's laser focused on Save America Act, as most common sense Americans are. The only path, I think, to get that done, because you're never going to get 7 Democrats to join 53 Republicans in the Senate to do that. They will not do it. Chuck Schumer will never vote for that or release any Democrat to do it. You have to put it on a reconciliation bill. We believe that if you create a grant program
and advance the majority's agenda, the Speaker is supposed to manage his majority and keep them unified. The Speaker is supposed to maintain order and enforce parliamentary rules. And Johnson cannot do any of those things anymore. Johnson has been completely overwhelmed by a handful of hardline rebels who have decided they are going to run the House instead of Johnson and the leadership. That is not just a political defeat. That is a complete collapse of authority. That is a speaker who is basically finished and done for. Now think about how Johnson got to this catastrophic point and how a man who started with so much promise ended up so completely broken.
That ties it to reconciling the budget, and you allow blue states, if they come to their senses and they want to avail themselves of election integrity proposals and ideas and policies, they can draw down from a federal fund and use those funds. We're willing to invest heavily in that. And House Republicans will put together a reconciliation bill, Reconciliation 3.0, that will have that. I talked the president through that in detail this morning, as I have in the past, and he said, can we do it? I said, we can, if the Republicans will stand together. We're on the line right now to defend it. Hold on. So that's what we're going to do. The president said, I want to see some progress on it. I said, I'd love to show it to you. We got a meeting today and some more coming up. And so he decided, and I didn't announce it. I wanted him to announce it, but we're delaying this. As you know, he has a window of time before he has to sign a bill, and he's going to use a little bit more of that window of time, and we're going to go through this together. Now, the housing bill is a great product because this guy right here fought like a warrior poet to defend our principles. It did have a lot of Elizabeth Warren's preferences and policy provisions in the original Senate bill.
Johnson came in as Trump's loyal speaker. Johnson promised to push Trump's agenda above all else. Johnson was supposed to be Trump's guy in Congress. Johnson was supposed to be tough and aggressive and willing to fight for Trump's priorities no matter what. Trump wanted Johnson as Speaker, and Johnson delivered on that promise. Johnson said he would be loyal to Trump. Johnson said he would do whatever it takes to pass Trump's bills. Johnson said he would be a Trump loyalist no matter what happens, and Trump rewarded him by backing him for Speaker.
But that's why we spent months and months and months doing the tug of war, and we wound up having 85%, that's my estimate, maybe more, of the housing, of the final product is housing conservative priorities and policies. And the other things that are in there are not consequential, not as consequential as all the great things that Chairman Hill outlined. I mean, we're addressing it's transformational legislation because we're addressing the affordability problem in housing that, as he said, has persisted since COVID. When interest rates are high and costs are high, it makes the barrier to entry so high that young families can't get into houses anymore. That's not a Republican or Democrat problem. It's an American problem. So Americans are fixing it. And so we're going to reduce regulation so builders can build. We're going to limit institutional investing in the housing market. We're going to bring the American dream back within the grasp of hardworking American families. Critical to do. Great policy. The president, when we go through the details of the bill, he's going to understand that it's a good product.
Trump invested political capital to make Johnson the leader of the House of Representatives. Trump gave Johnson the job as a sign of favor and trust. But that loyalty has become a trap. That loyalty has become a prison from which there is no escape. Because now Trump keeps demanding impossible things from Johnson. Trump keeps demanding votes that do not have the votes to pass. Trump keeps demanding legislation that even Republicans within his own party do not agree on. Trump keeps escalating his demands month after month.
And certainly something that fulfills his promises to bring down the cost. Interest rates is another big priority of his and all of ours. And I think the new Fed chair will do that. We get the economy humming again. We keep the Strait of Hormuz open. We keep gas prices down to earth. This economy is going to take off like a rocket, y'all. Because in 2025, as Scott Bessent said, the Treasury Secretary said months ago, 2025 was like setting the table. The feast and the banquet in the economy is in 2026. We were doing that in the first quarter. We had the Iran skirmish. We settled that thing out. We're cooking with gas. We love to do it. Yeah.
So is it your understanding that President Trump is going to sign the housing bill at a later date? And how much later can it go? Because as you said, affordability is huge for Americans. This is a key bill to do it with.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get signed by the
You're talking about
time.
days. You know, the window of time for it just passed last night, right? So 10 days is my estimation. He'll do it within that 10-day window.
Trump keeps attacking Johnson when Johnson cannot deliver what he wants. Trump keeps pressuring Johnson to do things that will destroy his speakership. And the hardline MAGA Republicans, the Freedom Caucus extremists and bomb throwers, are using Trump's demands as cover to take over the House. They are saying if Trump wants this, we want this, and we will not let anything else happen until it passes. They are weaponizing Trump's agenda to seize power from Johnson, and Johnson is caught in an impossible position that has no good way out. Johnson cannot satisfy Trump without losing moderate Republicans who still want to govern and compromise. Johnson cannot satisfy moderates without angering Trump and his base. Johnson cannot please both sides. So Johnson gets destroyed by both sides simultaneously in a pincer movement that leaves him no room to maneuver. And on that fateful Tuesday, it all comes to a head in a dramatic collapse that everyone saw coming, but nobody could prevent. Reports indicate that Johnson once again lost a battle against hardline conservatives for control of his own House floor. A small group led by hardliners basically mutinied against Johnson's leadership. They refused to allow action on any GOP priorities. They refused to let votes happen on any bills. They refused to let the House function and conduct its business until leaders came up with a plan to pass Trump's federal elections overhaul bill. And Johnson could not stop them. Johnson could not overcome them. Johnson could not regain control of his own chamber. So Johnson did the only thing he could do in that situation. He admitted complete defeat. He instructed members to leave Washington early. He scrapped nearly an entire week of the legislative agenda. He sent everyone home. And that is absolutely humiliating for a speaker. That is the sign of a speaker who has completely and totally lost control of his own party and his own chamber. Let me walk you through exactly how Johnson got into this impossible situation, because this is actually a perfect and tragic example of how Trump destroys people around him. Johnson started as Speaker with a lot of initial promise and optimism. Johnson was supposed to be different from Kevin McCarthy. Johnson was supposed to be tougher and stronger. Johnson was supposed to be more aligned with Trump personally. Johnson was supposed to be able to manage the hardliners and keep them in line. Johnson was supposed to deliver results. But from the very beginning, Johnson was trapped by his circumstances. Because he had a very slim majority in the House, he had almost no room for error whatsoever. One or two Republican defections and bills would fail. One or two Republican votes and things would fall apart. One or two senators refusing to go along and the whole thing would collapse. And the hardliners knew this. The hardliners knew they had leverage. The hardliners knew they could basically hold Congress hostage by threatening to vote no on key legislation. And Trump, instead of helping Johnson navigate this difficult situation, Trump made it exponentially worse. Trump kept demanding impossible things that Johnson simply could not deliver. Reports from earlier in the year showed that party infighting and revolts were continuing to complicate Johnson's job significantly. Multiple major bills had stalled in the House as Republicans split over Trump's demands. Key measures, including a Department of Defense shutdown fix and a surveillance renewal that was supposed to keep America safe, were effectively frozen because Republicans could not agree. And one GOP strategist told the press that Johnson's slim majority is not a true majority at all. Every single vote becomes a minefield. Every single bill has to be negotiated painstakingly. Every single piece of legislation requires compromise and horse trading that is exhausting. But Trump does not want compromise. Trump does not believe in compromise. Trump wants total victory and nothing less. Trump wants his election overhaul bill passed immediately. Trump wants his war funding passed without question. Trump wants his judges confirmed without delay. Trump wants everything his way and refuses to accept anything less. And when he does not get it, when Congress does not deliver exactly what he wants, Trump attacks Johnson. Trump calls Johnson weak and ineffective. Trump calls Johnson a failure. Trump threatens to back primary challengers against Johnson if he does not deliver on his demands. Trump basically treats Johnson like a subordinate employee, not like a co-equal leader of an equal branch of government. And Johnson, because he is Trump's loyalist, has to accept this abuse. Johnson has to try to satisfy Trump even when it is impossible. Johnson has to keep trying even when the votes are not there. Johnson has to keep pushing even when he knows he will fail. And then the MAGA hardliners see what Trump wants, and they use it as a weapon and a tool. They say if Trump wants the election bill, we want the election bill, and we are not voting for anything else until it passes. They are basically weaponizing Trump's demands to take over Congress and seize power. They are using Trump as cover for their own power grab. They are holding the entire House hostage, and Johnson cannot stop them because Johnson owes his position to Trump. Johnson came to Congress and became Speaker because Trump backed him. Johnson cannot turn on Trump. Johnson cannot tell Trump that his demands are unreasonable and impossible. Johnson cannot push back on Trump without risking his own speakership and position. So Johnson is trapped in a cage with no way out. Earlier warnings showed this was coming down the road. It was obvious to anyone paying attention. Reports from months earlier noted that Johnson's speakership was on the chopping block and in serious danger after he pushed a bipartisan resolution to avert a partial government shutdown. Influential Republicans were already scheming revenge against Johnson. Political commentators declared Johnson finished as Speaker for cutting a deal that kept the government open, and that was just the beginning. That was months before the real chaos exploded. That was before the MAGA hardliners fully realized they could take over the House floor. Analysis from earlier in the year noted that it took less than 6 months for Johnson to reach his existential moment as Speaker when he considered advancing Ukraine and Israel aid over objections from Trump-aligned hardliners. The analysis warned that in the current GOP, doing the right thing legislatively could cost the Speaker his job and his gavel. And that is exactly what happened. Johnson tried to do his job. Johnson tried to advance legislation. Johnson tried to manage the House responsibly, and the hardliners destroyed him for it. They basically punished him for trying to govern. So by that fateful Tuesday, Johnson is hanging on by a thread that is about to snap completely. Johnson has basically no support left anywhere. The hardliners do not trust him. The moderates are furious at him for repeatedly threatening government shutdowns and dragging them into brinkmanship. Trump is using him as a pawn and throwing him under the bus. And Johnson has no allies left. Johnson has no one to turn to. Johnson is isolated and alone. Johnson is weak and vulnerable. Johnson is finished. And then the MAGA rebels seize the floor in a dramatic mutiny. They basically stage a rebellion against Johnson's leadership. They refuse to let votes happen on any bills. They refuse to let the House function and do its job. They hold Congress hostage until Johnson agrees to pass Trump's election bill. And Johnson cannot stop them because his majority is too slim and fragile. Johnson cannot force them to vote. Johnson cannot expel them from Congress. Johnson cannot do anything except capitulate to their demands. So Johnson does the only thing he can do. He surrenders completely. He tells members to go home. He cancels the week. He admits complete defeat in front of the whole country. So let me break this down into what actually matters here and what this means going forward for the country and for the institution of Congress. Trump has completely destroyed Mike Johnson's effectiveness as Speaker and has essentially ended his career in Congress. So understand what happened and the full scope of the disaster. Johnson came in as Trump's guy. Johnson was supposed to be Trump's loyal soldier in Congress. Johnson was supposed to deliver for Trump and push his agenda. Johnson was supposed to be tough and aggressive and push through Trump's legislation. But Trump's demands were impossible from the start. Trump's demands were unreasonable and unfeasible. Trump's demands were so extreme that they fractured the Republican Party and made governing impossible. And instead of helping Johnson manage this disaster, Trump just kept demanding more. Trump kept escalating. Trump kept attacking Johnson. When Johnson could not deliver what he wanted, Trump hung Johnson out to dry and abandoned him. Trump basically used Johnson up and then threw him away like garbage. And now Johnson is destroyed. Johnson has lost credibility with his own party completely. Johnson has lost control of his own chamber. Johnson cannot get votes on legislation. Johnson cannot move bills. Johnson cannot function as Speaker. Johnson is basically a figurehead now with no real power. Johnson is basically powerless and impotent. And this happened because Trump demanded impossible things and then abandoned Johnson when those demands blew up in Congress and destroyed everything. That is Trump's pattern and his standard operating procedure. Trump installs loyalists who he says will be great. Trump demands impossible things from them. Trump attacks them when they cannot deliver. Trump destroys them. And then Trump moves on to the next person without a second thought. Johnson is following the exact same path that Kevin McCarthy followed before him. McCarthy was Speaker before Johnson. McCarthy tried to be Trump's loyal soldier in Congress. McCarthy tried to satisfy Trump's demands. McCarthy tried to manage the hardliners and keep the caucus together, and it destroyed McCarthy's career and political future. McCarthy eventually had to resign because he could not control his own party anymore. And now Johnson is following the exact same path. Johnson is trying to be Trump's guy. Johnson is trying to satisfy Trump's demands. Johnson is trying to manage the hardliners and keep everyone together, and it is destroying his career just like it destroyed McCarthy's. The warnings were there for anyone paying attention. Commentators warned that Johnson was finished as Speaker. Analysts warned that doing the right thing could cost Johnson his gavel. Political observers warned that Johnson's slim majority was a death trap and a disaster waiting to happen. Everyone could see this coming from a mile away. Everyone knew Johnson was trapped, but Johnson did not listen to the warnings. Johnson doubled down. Johnson tried to be Trump's loyal soldier, and it cost him everything in his political career. Trump's demands are paralyzing Congress and making it unable to do basic governing for the American people. So think about what just happened during this collapse. Congress could not pass war funding for the war that Trump started. Congress could not pass surveillance renewals that are crucial for national security. Congress could not pass basic government funding. Congress could not function because Trump wanted his election bill passed first and before anything else. Trump essentially held Congress hostage. Trump said, "Pass my election bill or nothing else happens." And Congress basically shut down completely. Members had to go home. The entire legislative agenda stalled. The government ground to a halt. All because Trump demanded one specific bill that does not even have the votes to pass. This is incredibly dangerous for the country and for national security. Because what happens if there is a genuine national emergency? What happens if there is a war and Congress needs to vote immediately on military funding? What happens if there is an economic crisis and Congress needs to pass emergency measures to protect people? Congress cannot function. Congress has been paralyzed by Trump's demands. Trump has basically broken Congress. Trump has made it impossible for Congress to do its job. Trump has turned Congress into a tool of his own political agenda instead of an institution that serves the American people and the country. And Johnson is the casualty of this breakdown. Johnson is the one taking all the blame. Johnson is the one being destroyed for this failure. But the real problem is Trump. Trump is the one making impossible demands. Trump is the one refusing compromise. Trump is the one turning Congress into chaos. Trump is the one destroying the institution. But because Trump is president and has power, Johnson is the one getting destroyed. Johnson is the one losing his speakership and credibility. Johnson is the one becoming ineffective. Trump just moves on without any consequences. This shows that Trump's grip on his own party is creating instability instead of unity and strength. Trump is supposed to be the leader of the Republican Party. Trump is supposed to be able to unite Republicans and make them work together. Trump is supposed to be able to get things done with Republican majorities in Congress. But instead, Trump's demands are fracturing the party deeply. Trump's demands are creating rebellions. Trump's demands are making it impossible for Republican leaders to function or govern. Instead of unity, Trump is creating chaos. Instead of strength, Trump is creating weakness. Instead of effectiveness, Trump is creating paralysis. The MAGA hardliners are using Trump's demands as cover for their own power grab. They are saying Trump wants this, so we want this, and we will not compromise. They are basically taking over the House in Trump's name. They are fracturing the party in Trump's name. They are destroying Congress in Trump's name, and Trump does not stop them or tell them to stop. Trump does not tell them to compromise or work with Johnson. Trump does not tell them to let Congress function. Instead, Trump either encourages them or stays completely silent. Trump lets them destroy Johnson. Trump lets them paralyze Congress. Trump lets them create chaos. So the result is that Trump is actually making his own party weaker, not stronger. Trump is making it harder to govern, not easier. Trump is making Congress less functional, not more functional. Trump is destroying people around him, not empowering them. Trump is making enemies within his own party, not building allies. And this is all self-inflicted and self-created. Trump is doing this to himself and his party. And Johnson is the latest casualty and victim. Johnson came in as Trump's loyal soldier. Johnson promised to be Trump's guy in Congress. Johnson tried desperately to deliver for Trump. And Trump destroyed him. Trump hung him out to dry. Trump abandoned him. Trump let the hardliners mutiny on him. Trump let Congress spiral into chaos. And Johnson is left holding the bag. Johnson is left being blamed for the failure. Johnson is left losing his speakership. Trump just moves on to his next victim without a second thought. So here's what you need to understand about this moment right now. Trump has essentially ended Mike Johnson's career as Speaker of the House. Johnson is damaged goods. Johnson cannot recover from this publicly. Johnson has lost control of his chamber. Johnson has lost credibility with his party. Johnson has lost the ability to function as an effective leader. And it all happened because Trump made impossible demands and then abandoned Johnson when those demands blew up. This is Trump's pattern. This is how Trump operates with the people around him. Trump installs loyalists who he says will be great guys. Trump demands impossible things from them. Trump destroys them when they cannot deliver. Trump moves on to the next person. And the country suffers because of this. Congress is paralyzed. Legislation is stalled. The government is grinding to a halt. War funding is blocked. Surveillance renewals are blocked. Basic government functions are blocked all because Trump demanded one specific bill and would not compromise or negotiate. Trump has basically broken Congress. Trump has made it impossible for the legislature to function effectively. And Johnson is the casualty. Johnson is destroyed. Johnson's career is over. Johnson's effectiveness is finished. And all of this happened because Trump's demands were impossible, and Trump abandoned Johnson when he could not deliver. This is the real tragedy and the real cost of this situation. This is the real cost of Trump breaking Congress. Now, here is something important to understand about what this means going forward for the country. If Johnson loses his speakership completely, if Johnson gets replaced by another speaker, that new speaker will face the exact same trap that destroyed McCarthy and destroyed Johnson. That new speaker will have a slim majority. That new speaker will face hardline rebels who weaponize Trump's demands for power. That new speaker will be caught between Trump's escalating demands and the need to actually govern the country and pass legislation. A new speaker will probably be destroyed just like Johnson was destroyed. So the Republican Party has created a system where the speaker's job is basically impossible. The speaker's job has become a death trap, and Trump is actively making it worse by refusing to compromise with anyone and abandoning his allies when they cannot deliver. This is incredibly bad for the country and our institutions. This means Congress is going to be dysfunctional for the foreseeable future. This means the legislature is not going to be able to function effectively. This means wars are going to be hard to authorize and fund. This means emergencies are going to be hard to respond to with legislation. This means the country's basic governing institutions are being broken down by internal Republican chaos. And Trump is driving a lot of that chaos. Trump is refusing to compromise on anything. Trump is demanding impossible things from leaders. Trump is destroying people around him. And Johnson is just the latest victim of this pattern. Perhaps most importantly, this whole situation shows how Trump is fundamentally unable to share power or work with equals in government. Trump cannot accept that Congress is a separate branch of government with its own authority. Trump cannot accept that the Speaker has responsibilities that sometimes conflict with Trump's agenda. Trump demands total loyalty and total compliance. Trump demands that Congress bend to his will. Trump demands that Republicans pass whatever he wants regardless of votes or feasibility. And when they cannot, when they push back, when they ask for compromise, Trump destroys them. That is a fundamental and serious problem with how Trump operates as president and how he relates to Congress and the constitutional separation of powers. Trump's cycle of choosing loyalists, demanding the impossible, then discarding them, has now destroyed Mike Johnson's speakership, just as it did McCarthy's. The systematic breakdown of the House reflects Trump's approach to power, and the dysfunction will leave the institution crippled for years to come.